Hi folks, I'm International Master John Watson and this is Ask the Master on ICC TV. The main idea of the show is to provide a forum for you, the viewers and listeners, to ask questions of a master about the chess world, about chess positions, chess books, chess videos, chess strategy, advice about anything, tournament chess, or even just give your opinions about chess. We can go with those, so it's sort of like a talk show. And you can send these questions in advance by my email is the best way to do this, and that's askimwatson@chessclub.com. So that's ASKIMWATSON at chessclub.com. That's CHESSCLUB.com. Okay, and then the other way you can do it if you're an ICC member is you can message me at my handle, John L. Watson, L as in lion, JOHNLWATSON. And we've gotten a lot of things here. We have somebody on, sorry, we started a little late today, on the chat box, which those of you who are on the chat can see. And you can ask questions that way, and we get a lot of them that way. In fact, I keep answering them the next week or the week after because I can't get to them all. So that's the other way to do it. So without further ado then, I have a bunch of additions from last week, questions I didn't get to. One sort of major sort of correction and addition that I think will be of interest to people. And that is about that game between Sedlak and So that we were talking about in the London system. And it's amazing how much interest we've had in the London system as both white and black. A lot of people, teachers, are teaching their kids to play the London system, I think. And on top of that, we've had a lot of questions about how to play it as black. So last week, I looked at this game between So and Sedlak. And first of all, I want to talk about the books that I mentioned. That was from the Olympiad game, actually, in Baku. And I was asked about a comment from a new book by Sedlak himself, Nicholas Sedlak, who's the one who played the game against So. And his book is actually published by Chess Evolution. And I didn't have it before me, but I do now. It's called Winning with the Modern London System. I was actually mixing this up with another new London System book, which is called The Agile London System, which I'd already quoted from before in weeks before, by Alfonso Romero and Oscar de Prado. So these are two new books about the London. And just to be clear, the Sedlak book is only about 1d4, d5, bishop f4, things where these moves have been played. And then other setups. The other book has a wide variety of London systems, including the one I just mentioned, but also anything after this. Queen's Indian setups, Grunfeld setups, King's Indian setups. So that's the book. That's a more comprehensive book. It's by, as I say, Alfonso Romero and Oscar de Prado. So Sedlak's book is more specialized and, of course, therefore has more detail about d4, d5 systems. And let me just show you this game, which transposes. So there's a d4, d5 system, and white plays bishop f4. And that's what the game we talked about last week was. So now, it turns out that I was right, that Sedlak played a move that he had not played in the, let me just show you some more moves, because you can go back and look at this, that he had not mentioned in his book. This is the classical sort of London, anti-London system for black. And this can happen in various orders. But you get to this position. And we talked about this move b6. That's a very good move and a very accurate move, and Sedlak thinks it's the best move. So, and most people seem to like it a lot. It just gets a piece out. It stops you from having to take with either a queen or a piece on that square if he captures, and it gets another piece out, which might go to here, and it might even go over here and exchange that bishop here. So at this point, he didn't play knight e5. Sedlak played queen e2. And you can go back there and look at that game. And we also have talked in the past, and Sedlak talks about in his book, now that I have his book, I'm looking at it, he also talks about this move. And he agrees that this move, that black actually stands pretty well after that idea, the retreat. And then after this, there's nothing much better than that going out here with knight h5. And we talked about this at, I think, some length, actually. And I believe it was just last week. We might have mentioned it even before. So that's not really what's at stake here. So what I wanted to show you is what Sedlak says about the main line, the one he really recommends. He doesn't recommend the move queen e2, sorry. That's what he played in the So game. So you can go back and look at that. But in his book he recommends this, like just about everybody else does. And then black, in the game I'm going to show you, played here. This is a Grischuk game, actually. It's a Grischuk Wang. You can look this up. It's a also fairly recent game. And he says some interesting things about this. He thinks that's a poor move, and he thinks it's inferior after f4. Remember, that's White's main plan. And then when White plays the knight e7 move we've talked about quite a bit, trying to get here and also get more control over that square. Those two squares are key here. He says it's too late for that, or it's not well timed for that because of bishop h4. But the thing is, he's not really threatening to double those pawns. So he gives this. He gives takes, captures, knight g4, attacking here, and says that White's better. I think he gives a couple more moves. He gives this move, and then when black plays h5, which seems to just immediately either win something or equalize or something, he gives this counter attack with e4, and he says White's better. I don't think it's true. You take there, and if he takes this way, you can even start counterattacking on all these light squares. That works out pretty well. It's probably only about equal, and this one also I think is about equal, which is the one I think he wanted to play, but I don't think this is anything special at all. Black's very secure in this position. There are a lot of draws because White gets perpetual checks on these two files sometimes, but anyway, so I don't even agree with him about this. But it still may not be something you want to play. It can easily draw. It does weaken your position. So I have a couple other moves here that I think are better. One thing is you can just go here, just attack the bishop, and when it comes back, just develop. Now you've got the idea of knight e4 followed by f6. So White's probably going to stop that, and then I think just knight back again with the idea of f6. And I couldn't really find anything particularly special about this for White. I think, for example, that position could happen, and I think black's fine here. So let me just, so that's it. You can play knight g6. It's not exciting, and you're certainly not better as black, but I think you're fine. The most natural and perfectly good move is just this. Sedlak only gives one main line here, by the way. Sedlak gives, he doesn't give knight f5 as the main line. He gives this as the main line. And even that, I think, he has White play here, and black I think you can just equalize taking there. There's a very cute line here he gives, though, that's really worth showing real quickly, just because it's fun. This is fun stuff. He wants White to play this move. It's actually very clever. It doesn't look like White's really doing much on the king side, but it's really kind of neat. The idea is that after this, you're going to play check. Now, it turns out, I think, that black makes it, but he has black playing here now. I think it turns out that this move actually salvages black's position. And I'm not going to go into details because we need to look at the questions. Hello, everybody. And we also need to get on to other examples and other things that people asked about last week. But just for the record, if you wanted to see, I think that's a better move. He has a very ingenious idea after this, which is just to play very slowly with this move g4. Let me make sure I get this all right. It's really kind of cute. Now, for example, okay, let's just say black plays some sort of neutralish kind of move. You just ignore everything and play there, and this is actually already a winning position. The reason it's a winning position, let me just show you a brute force thing. It's because you have a threat. Your threat is actually check. It's kind of amazing, and no matter how black takes that, you just play here, and there's no way to stop mate. Isn't that ridiculous? Even if that doesn't stop mate, because there's still queen h8. It's a really silly threat. It's kind of amazing. But that means black has to try other things, and it really, even if he does some sort of obvious things like that, and then plays here, White can cut off that bishop and then play the same idea. He's still threatening knight check and g6. And as you can imagine, there are other tricky, strange things that can happen. His main line, he doesn't show any of this actually, but he does show this part, and he gives us the main line. Let's see if I can remember this. Yeah, something like takes here and capturing this way in order to play rook f5. But the problem there is this move, just threatening to play knight up, and you play checkmate. And if black starts making moves like this, you'll see what happens. Now the e5 square is killing you because you win a queen here. So, and White still has an attack. Okay, so anyway, that's kind of cute. I think that whole tactic with knight e7 and g6 is kind of astonishing, and actually seems to work. As I say, queen c7 saves black anyway, but he doesn't go into that kind of analytic. He sort of shows ideas more than reality. So, and as I say, bishop takes e7 is okay for black too. So, but without wasting any more time on that, let me just show you Okay, so b6, bishop b7 is obviously the main move. f4, and now knight e7 is exclamation point. We showed you this before, and Sedlak here shows something else. This was the line that I think I showed before, kind of the idea that Black's play is based on. It's based on this move, trying to get rid of that, and if he moves back, then you move your bishop and you get knight d6 in. I think you play bishop e7 here. Just make sure that that's what I was thinking of doing. Yes, exactly. And then if he starts making the obvious attacking moves, you go there, and having a piece here is just going to block off the entire attack. You actually move this piece there, and then you have f6 and f5 also moves like that. Easy to defend this attack. It's not really much of an attack. Black may even be better already, because that's not an outpost on e5. You're going to play f6 and get rid of that knight. Okay, so we showed you that. So what he says, though, is you should play this. He says the only move, queen b1, but the only move that gives chances for an advantage. And I just want to show you, because this is in his book, and it's not something I had access to last week. And you might run into something like this if you're black, and you might want to play if you're white. I think that black is fine here. Let me just play the main line. I think this is not like you have to play this, but I think this is the one that appeals to me the most. And if white plays bishop h4 now, this move is actually quite fine, attacking the bishop. And then you give up this exchange, so it looks kind of funny, but it's actually a bad move because, let me just show you this. Wait, do I have this right? No, I don't have this right. Excuse me. I skipped something somewhere. Let me just see this. Okay, g6, bishop h4. Yeah, c takes d4 hasn't been played yet. Okay, g6, queen b1, g6, bishop f2 is played, and if bishop f4, let me take a look at this again. Bishop f4 here. Now if he takes here, there's no problem, because you can always play bishop e7 next. No problem. In fact, black's probably a little better there. And if he takes here, let me think about this again. And tries, oh, we have queen h4 check, of course. I'm sorry. Yeah, queen h4 or h4 check. And that's very good, because you don't even win any material. White doesn't even win any material, and black's got obviously a huge attack. By the way, that's hanging too. Okay, sorry. So bishop f2 is played instead, sort of natural. There we go. And black can play knight f5 now. Black can play a5, and bishop a6 is not a bad plan. And once he gets rid of that bishop, then play knight back and just play for f6. But the main line that I see here is just there. I don't think white has anything here. Knight here attacks this pawn. And there, gets rid of the knight, gets rid of the outpost. And once you get rid of that outpost, you're usually not in much danger. This actual game went like this. Grischuk was white, one of the best players in the world, and Wang, a very, very strong grandmaster, was black. And I think he actually ended up winning the game, actually, even, but that had nothing to do with the opening. This actually happened. All these moves actually happened, and black had other ways of doing something similar to this that were just fine. Sure, there's one weakness here, but it's easy to defend, and black has more squares to put his pieces on. This is a very bad bishop. Look at that bishop. Black doesn't any longer have a really bad bishop, because that one's, which was bad, behind its own pawns, is actually has quite a bit of influence on the game. So it's probably only equal, because white has some space, and that is, after all, something that black has to be careful of on the file, but perfectly playable. Okay, yes, this is the London, for those who were asking. And I'm going over the thing that we did last week, but I got the book, the actual Sedlak book, which I had made a mistake about. I didn't realize that the book I was talking about was this Agile London book. So I wanted to show you what Sedlak said in his book about these lines. Okay, good. So let me just move on from this. And do we have any questions yet? No, not yet. And that's fine, because there's other stuff from last week that would be nice to get to. People keep asking these great questions, but some of them are by chat. This one, I believe, yeah, this was from an email. And this one is, let me get rid of this here. Let me examine this. EX78. I got several good questions over the last couple of weeks that I never got to. Okay, here's one. This is about the French defense. It's an early queen g4 line in the classical French. Okay, there's the classical French. Let's talk about this move. Trying to get the queen out early, put some pressure here, stop that from developing, maybe castle queenside, clear out the queenside, castle queenside. He says you write in the 4th edition, let's just get this right here. Okay, you write in the 4th edition of Play the French that white must try to get knight b6, oh I'm sorry, black plays c5. Let's get one more move in. b5 to d6 in, or perhaps d takes c5 at the right moment. And you continue to analyze what happens after knight f3. But what happens if white goes straight after that plan and continues d takes c5? Here's what I showed. I showed knight f3 and here. And the problem is knight f6 check wasn't doing any good because after bishop takes, if he just takes back, of course, black's getting materially ahead and has a huge center and can just play, and the queens looks silly. So that's really not very good. You could play queen f6. There's all kinds of things you could play there. But you might think at first sight, well, maybe that's decent. And the only problem is that allows you to throw in that check. So now black's a piece up temporarily. And this kind of position here is just awful because black's winning all these center pawns. Right now he's threatening to just take with check. And you can analyze this, but it just doesn't work out. That's what I gave in the book. Now as a sideline. And he's saying, okay, but why don't we just take to begin with? Take this. And he says perhaps play could continue. Then he gives knight takes e5, and we'll talk about that because you could play knight c6 here, but I don't think I'll go into that, but that's actually quite a playable move. But the obvious move is knight takes e5, so let's look at that. Queen attacks, knight protects, and then he wants to play knight b5 now. Same sort of idea, check, diverting this, and then you can play queen takes g7. So I'll get back to that. Let me first show you what you should play, or yeah, let me show you what you probably should play here, which is bishop f4 is a little bit better. And then if here you go in here, I still think black's absolutely fine here because black's center is very strong here. And then maybe white could at least save his pawn temporarily and sort of control things there. The problem is this center is going to be advancing and black's going to be castling. And if white tries to stop black from castling, you can just go here, castle, and play rook d8. So it's all kind of falling apart because the center is too strong. He's got 2 center pawns to none. And so the whole strategy isn't quite working. But the idea, his idea was to play knight b5. And I think what he missed was just bishop c5. He gave this line. He gave here, check, takes, captures on g7. The knight comes back to defend the rook. Captures here, and he stops there and says this looks fine for white. I don't think it looks bad for black either because he's got the center, but at least here it's kind of dynamically balanced. And yeah, I mean, this is a game. This would be interesting. I don't really think black's worse here, but you could play this way as white for sure. The problem is I think there's sort of a flaw in this, which is that this move turns out to be extremely strong, just capturing that right away. And what he might have missed was the fact that after this, how good this is for black. Not only does he have the center and a big lead in development, but he has a huge threat. His threat is to play this move, bishop here. Let's make a slow move and I'll show you that. Let's say white does nothing basically, and that queen's kind of trapped. It can't go this way, it has no squares this way, and if it goes all the way back, it's lost anyway. That's how bad this position can be. Isn't that weird? It's a very big threat, in other words. So h3 obviously, so he has to do something about that threat, and it turns out it's almost impossible to do anything about it. Probably the best move is queen h6 as it turns out. I sort of analyzed this. At least that keeps white in the game. But then we just chase this back and then expand in the center. And black has this huge center, much better development. He can always castle queenside if he needs to, but this kind of position is sort of a dream for the French player. Ahead in development, 2 bishops. Well, no, actually, you don't have to be. My fault. No, you don't have the bishop pair, but you do have better development, more activity. There's even threats on the king. You know, that's a weak square, and white's just completely undeveloped at this point. So and the queen can lose more time too. So that really doesn't work. So what he should do is play bishop f4 at this point. Might as well try it. And then probably black's easiest way to play this is to just keep his center pawns and give back 1 pawn by playing this way. And then, I mean, there's some variations here, but this is basically what's going on. And just play like that. It's easiest to play there because then bishop takes is not with check. And here's the point. The point is that now we do have the bishop pair, and we have the center, and white still doesn't have any pieces out we're speaking of, and he can't play bishop takes now because of check. So this position is very awkward. Probably the best move is to check and force the king up a little bit. He could take queens off and have a small advantage, but I want to win for black more convincingly. So I just want to get this big center going. And you can stop, you can go back and look at that. Let me see, do I give a line here? I guess I gave a brief line. This is what actually I'm just following the computer. This is what the computer says for both sides. Okay, so now white's actually ahead materially, but the bishop pair and pressure on both sides of the board are strong. Now unfortunately white can't play queen here now because of check, which would actually even up the material with and really start crushing in the center. So so white would play here, and then black just keeps attacking. And this position's very nice for white. Only has one pawn here, and black's got what he wants, basically. Real strong attack going. And there are plenty of ways to just move rooks into the center, and the queen side. Obviously, white really can't castle on either side of the board. That doesn't help. Anyway, okay, so that's what is that? That's sort of an answer to the question of what to do for black about that move. It just doesn't seem to work out tactically for white. It's a good idea, like tie him to that square. The problem is you can ignore that. I think that's the thing that is easy to miss, which is that so the real question is what about this position? And he had black playing here, and I'm just saying, well, you can just ignore that and take that, because this queen takes move, which is the absolute critical move, is actually quite bad because of this threat of bishop f8. And just positionally, black stands beautifully here as well. Okay, so that's something from last week. And then I got a question about the Albin counter-gambit. It might be nice to go to the chat now. Has anybody got any questions on the chat? Not quite yet, unless my computer's going crazy. Don't see anything. I hope I got all you guys' questions from last week. I think I did, because all the ones I have here are from other people. Anybody got anything to say here? Whoop, wake up everybody. I'm going to wait a second on the chat to see if we get any sort of response. I hope I'm not missing anything here, folks. Okay, so let me do something else then. Let me get another thing from. Okay, again, this is another email question. These are good questions. They're kind of sophisticated questions. This is the Albin counter-gambit. Whoops, not that. That's not the Albin counter-gambit. Let me get this up on my board. Ta-da! There we go. Okay, so this is a question about in the following position from the Albin counter-gambit. Let me just show you that. That's the Albin counter-gambit. We've looked at that before a little bit. Okay, black plays there. It says on page 56 of your book, let's see what he says here exactly. This is my book, Strategic Opening Repertoire for White. So I'm suggesting that white play this move, knight bd2. And he had a game with this here. So he says on page 56, you quite properly note that white comes out with a clear advantage after h3, bishop h5, b4, queen d7, and bishop b2. Okay, because that gives you the idea of playing here and here against the king sometimes, so it's very handy to get that h3 move in. And what he's saying is, well, h3 takes time. What about, I think he had a game actually even with this move, after knight here, capturing on f3. So he says it seems to me black has better with capturing and playing knight g6. That's to get back the pawn. And now he says now white has to struggle to maintain an advantage, and he talks about what he did in his analysis, what he looked for. And he found two pretty good lines, actually. I don't think white's struggling that much to find an advantage, but he has two really interesting ideas. Let me go to the very last one he mentions first. He's just playing this move. I mean, black's going to get this pawn back anyway, so the idea is break up these pawns. And this position is very interesting. He doesn't go beyond e6, but I think this is a good idea. For example, you could simply play here now, and you have a bishop pair, even material, And it's true he has two center pawns to one, but they really can't advance. That's the key. They're going to be. This is going to be a bad bishop. If this pawn gets to e5, this can be a bad bishop on f8. And for example, if he played that right away, well, you can't allow e4, but you can just stop this. And all of a sudden, black can't really add any impetus, or he can't enforce e4 anymore. So that means that white's doing quite well. He's just going to have really nice light square control. It's probably better for black to do something else, just develop and castle, and maybe put a couple things behind this pawn, because this pawn has some potential to expand. So white's advantage is limited, but it's there. It's definitely there. So it's actually quite a good idea to just play e6 if you want a simple advantage. He mentioned that as his main line, playing b4, the main thing that he looked at first. And let me see what he said about that. Yeah, black takes. Black takes. And white takes. And now the only issue here is, he said if, what was that? If, oh right, if bishop b2, then black plays here and shores up his center. And I think that's true. I think that's not easy to play at all. This makes sense for. It's true that white has two bishops. He's probably even better, but somehow it's not easy anymore. So then he said he came up with this nice idea, and this is what's cute: is why not? You don't have to bring the bishop that way. And the idea is that after capturing, I don't know if white wouldn't take first. White would take that way first. White has two bishops in an ending, and he says this looks tailor-made for the two bishops, perhaps drawn at the GM level. But it certainly seems a long slog defensively below, or below that level for black. So I agree. This is good for white, and whether it's actually winning is a little unclear, because black has more options here maybe than in the other lines. He can keep the queens on the board. I think, and he has rook d8 ideas maybe in some cases, and a5 ideas. And the other thing he can do here that maybe is a little funny, but all these things are better for white, just for the record. But the other thing is that after e3, it's not absolutely clear how easy that is. That sort of cramping move. Can't play f4 to get rid of the knight because of queen h4 check. And on the bishop here, I think we just play knight c4. And that's not at all clear, so you don't really want to play this way as white. Now, white is better here. He can just defend that pawn. That's the only real threat. And then play bishop b2. But I don't think it's that simple. What did I analyze here? There's something with this check. Maybe you just bring this out, and once he attacks that, you go check. And white's still better here. White ends up putting a rook over here and taking. But at least, there's play. It may not be worth it to play this way if you have better. And I think the better line, so there's three good moves, really, I think, because the third one that I have is just playing e3 right away. I think that's really a key. This is a more serious advantage. It's like you're slightly ahead of that ending we just looked at. Let me see. You could play d3 now, but then we play here. Now this time, everything's weak, and he doesn't have the pawn on d4. So this is just easy. Pawn up plus a positionally overwhelming game. So he can't fiddle around with d3. And if he takes, then we just take back, as we said before. And this position is, well, let's just look at this. He's got to be careful. He's really got to bring your rook into action, which is too bad. He'd like not to, but look at this kind of position. Either queen c2 or queen b3. Now you've got to really be careful. That's a threat. That check is certainly an idea. Rook d1 is a big idea. I think you might not survive the middle game. You're losing the end game for sure with the bishops, or at least close to losing. But you don't want to lose before then. So what he would have to do is take that first. And so this is the same thing. White plays either bishop e2, or I think even g3 might be even better. And then f4, and then bishop g2, and then, let me just show you how simple this is. This kind of position. Only reason I didn't play bishop g2 immediately is because of knight a5. And this kind of position, I don't think I went much further than this. Oh yeah, this is a possible problem with bishop takes c6, so I made that move. And just go there. And this kind of position you have to look at for a while, but white has everything he wants. He has space, the two bishops, he's even slightly ahead in development. But basically what happens is pawns start falling after a while when you have bishops that are this strong. In an ending with pawns on both sides of the board, remember that's the rule. If pawns are on both sides of the board, the bishop pair is always stronger, and here it's even better because white's pieces are all going to be super active, and at the same time he has space. He's gained space on the side of the board. So, got a chat here. So there's three ways. I think the question was very good. Your solutions were very good. And then here's another solution that may be even slightly better. What is the something about the exchange? Let me see. What is the best line in the Caro-Kann exchange? Wow. Okay. Pretty broad question. That's not going to be too easy. But for black or white, obviously for black, right? You wouldn't be worried about. Oh, sorry. Whoops. You wouldn't be worried about this if you were, unless you mean the best line for white in the Caro-Kann exchange. But that seems unlikely. So now this is the pan-off attack. So that's not usually considered the exchange. So he's probably talking about bishop d3 here. You might want to make that clear, which line you're talking about. Really, the question is, what's the best line for black, and what do you do about it? Or is that what you mean? What to do for black? Because I think for black, it's I think the best line is to do this thing with knight here, attacking here, c3. And now instead of all the sort of the slow lines like this, I don't know if you know these lines, but instead of going like for this kind of thing, where maybe white gets a slight advantage, or maybe not, but it's not clear, right? Or for example, the traditional line, the Fischer line, this thing. I think it's true that black's fine here. For example, this move queen here. I think Petrosian played queen c8 or something. Let me show you one example. White plays here. White's playing for a reverse queen's gambit declined, basically. And here's something that a long time ago someone discovered, is you didn't have to worry about this pawn so much. You could just play bishop here. Are we looking for black or white? For black. There we go. So you could play this line if you know it. As long as you study it, you can afford to give up this pawn. Turns out he really can't take that pawn. I guess that's pretty obvious, isn't it, actually? I think if he takes it, you don't even play rook b8. I think you just castle. Could that be true? No, that can't be true. It's got to be rook b8, I guess. Take a quick look at this. Maybe you castle now. Oh, yeah, because you have some tricks. Right. Now if he tries to save that pawn, you're going to get a 7th rank rook with even material if he doesn't do something special here. But if he tries to save it somehow, like makes a move like that, then his queen gets in trouble, I believe. See how that square is covered? So maybe he can go here. The point is he's getting too far behind in development. Now you're blasting through on the file. He can't really get castled, can he? That's the problem. You're threatening e4. So this is already, I hate to say winning, but it seems like it is actually. Because if white can't castle, he's going to be in big trouble. In other words, after this, the bishop's attacked, and the rook's coming here. And if he takes it, then the king has to move to f1 apparently, which looks like it loses. Oh yeah, queen takes. We'll do it, hitting 3 pieces. I'm kind of making this up. You can look at it on a computer, but I do know it's true. I know this is a line, and I know it works tactically. But the problem is if he doesn't play something to defend this, like if he plays, let me see, black's castled, right? If he doesn't do something because here's the problem. I think if black plays this immediately, there might be a knight e5 idea, which could be kind of interesting, with sort of a double attack idea. And then he also has bishop b5 as an idea, and queen a4. I guess this would be forced, and then queen check maybe. It's a little too awkward. I wouldn't want to risk this as black. So what you do is, it turns out, just wait a move in this position, right here. You just castle first, get out of all the threats, and now you're ready for rook takes b2. And you're also ready for just rook b6. Again, knight e5 is an issue. So what you do is you go rook b6 first. If he goes back here, look at those pawns. That's got to be good for black, right? Well, I don't know, maybe at least equal anyway. See, outpost, outpost, weakness, weakness, weakness. Something like that, or doubling. Should be fine. I think all this is theory, so you can look it up, but it's a decent line. So that's one way you can do it. I don't know if white has that many decent options in these positions, but I would think even the better line, the line that really discourages people in the Caro-Kann exchange, is this move. If you look at Lars Schandorf's book in the Caro-Kann, Plain Black, this is what he recommends. And the only reason I mention that book is a lot of people recommend this, but he has the more, it's not that old a book, it's just a few years old, and it's got a lot of analysis. The point is that you're going to get e5 in almost no matter what. Like if white plays here, which is certainly what you think he would do, right? Just play for that. You just play e5, and that isolated pawn doesn't hurt you at all because of the lead in development. At least that's the idea, supposedly. Why is that? Actually, that's sort of interesting. Why isn't that a problem? Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's a matter of taste. Do I have this wrong? Maybe someone can inform me if I have this wrong. Maybe you wait a second before you play e5. Actually, maybe play something like bishop g4. Could have sworn it was e5 right now. Yeah, because otherwise bishop f4 can come. Okay, so e5 captures, and you definitely take this way. Now, what would happen if you play something like check? And takes, I guess. You can see that white can't really grab that pawn. But that's going to be very, very risky, right? With all these pieces coming out. Even that's not completely clear, but you're getting rooks to these central files. Aha! So maybe someone wants to take a quick look at this. I know that that's the main recommendation. That Fischer line I was showing you, the Fischer-Petrosian line, that's something I know a little bit about because I remember the tactics with bishop d6 and queen b7. This line I don't know enough about, unfortunately. I just know this is what discourages people. People do not want that e5 move coming. No, I don't really, somehow I don't really see that. I'm not sure why that is. It just doesn't seem right to me that that's so obvious. But maybe it's this move first, and if that, you have queen b6. No, that can't be right. Okay, I think it's e5. You don't take with a queen, do you? Haha, someone better look this up. Quick, open the books. Anyway, Schandorf recommends playing this way, and I guess people think this position is fine for black. I guess that's the moral of the story. I will look this up. My fault for not really knowing this stuff. I just know that the queen c7 is the move that discourages people. Because it means that white can't play his just standard plan of bishop f4, knight f3, castles, and rook e1. Amazing, huh? So after this, and something like this, well, you just don't get bishop f4 and black's very comfortable. That's the theory. Huh. But knight e2. Is there any other answer to knight e2? I guess is the other question. Maybe something like bishop g4? I mean, you could just wait one more move and then play this. You know, that might be it. Maybe that's the idea. But then you have bishop b5 check, right? Which looks pretty interesting. Okay, folks, I have to look at this for next week. If someone can look this up, they can tell me right now what I'm doing wrong, if anything. You've got me more interested, but I do know that's the move that people always talk about, this queen c7 move. Okay, and if you don't like that, like I say, play that bishop g4, queen d7 idea. I'll show you that one more time because at least that one I know the right move order with, so at least that's something. So there you get this this thing, and here's the the Fischer the thing he made famous, stopping queen c7. By the way, that was one of the ideas of bishop f4, and then black plays here, and all these moves, like these moves, are all too slow, and white's not at all scared of those. I mean, black's not at all scared of those, and that's the move that it drove black crazy originally. He used to play there to defend b7, but as I say, now it turns out that you don't have to worry about this so much. This idea, people didn't like the queen on d7 because of the idea of knight here, bishop here, knight e5, those kinds of moves. But it turns out you're in plenty of time for that because you play here, and then you just play bishop d6 before white has a chance to get good moves in. So maybe look at that line, just because I can't remember the other one. Okay, what else we got? Any chance you cover the Alakin-Chatard? We've done a little of that in past shows, and I can covering the whole thing is tough. You might want to ask about a specific line. Obviously, there's pretty much a book's worth of material on the Alakin-Chatard. Let me show everybody what that is again. I think the interesting thing about the Alakin-Chatard is that good players as white are still playing that. Hu Yifan has won a bunch of games with it as white, so it's still clearly acceptable for white. In fact, we've been through a couple of lengthy lectures about this now that I think about it on this lecture show. So you want to go back and check out the shows. They're listed by opening on my Facebook page, John L. Watson, and you can go back and look for this this ECO code. But the Alakin-Chatard, just for those who don't remember, is this guy, H4, giving up a pawn. And one thing I pointed out in my lecture, and I showed a game with this, a game or two with this, is that you can, the new move, new meaning now 20 years old probably, but for years people played like Alakin did. Brought the queen to g4, knight to f4, and black really is pretty much okay on those lines. But then white came up with this idea of just simply attacking this pawn. And I showed a couple games with this, and it just seems like white's still getting an advantage in these games. and it's difficult for black to play. So then you go back to what all the, every book gives a different solution to it. Sorry, let me get back to the main line. H6 can be played. Castles can be played, oddly enough. C5 can be played. A6 can be played. There's all kinds of things. C5 is very thematic, just trying to attract the center. And I think I suggested a few lines. We went over castles, if I remember right. We analyzed castles some. H6 is perfectly playable. Some very good players play H6. In fact, I think you should probably come back after H6. I don't think taking is even very good now, actually. It's equal, but it's nothing special if you're trying to win the game. So first of all, I guess a couple of questions. One is, do you want to be white or black? Dominic, would you rather be white or black in this opening? Are we looking for white suggestions or black suggestions? Because as I say, if you're looking for in the acceptance line, I would strongly recommend playing this move instead of the old move. The idea is that you're attacking this, and what happens is then you just get rid of the queen and you castle queenside and start attacking, and you get your pieces coordinated. Whereas it turns out with the old lines you don't do that. But if you're thinking for black, I would not accept it probably. I would probably play something else, like H6 or even possibly C5 or castles. And I feel like I'm missing some other move. Well, you can always play A6 to be really careful about knight B5, so you can play C5. What's the line with, oh, there's F6 too, has been played. I'm not sure how good it is, but it's been played. It's legal anyway. Castles has been played a bunch recently. The only problem is I think there's some forced draws after castling, or at least things that are very close to forced draws. But anyway, Hu Yifan still plays as white, expecting to win against lower players. So she's got ways of playing it that are fun. Okay, you're playing black. Okay, yeah. You might want to go back to the older shows if you can find them. It's my John L. Watson Facebook. Also, all the old YouTube shows will be listed on YouTube. They're all archived, and below them we've placed the openings that are covered. So that's a little more arduous to actually have to go through each show. Look at right underneath the text on each show. So the best thing to do is if you can find my Facebook page, John L. Watson. It's not on the wall. It's on the whatever else it's called. Just the main page, the home page, I think it's called. And do that. So what else do we have here? And that's a good thing to ask about in advance too, because I can prepare a really nice answer for you if you want to. What system? Unbelievable. Mohammed Qasim. Yeah, every week we get this question about the London system. We've talked more about black against the London system than any other subject on this show. So once again, you also, Mohammed, should go back and take a look at earlier shows. And in fact, the beginning of the show, you weren't here probably because we were just talking about black in the London system. Did you see the beginning of the show? The first 10 minutes I went over, or 15 or 20 minutes, I went over an anti-London system. This is so fascinating that you guys are all playing black in the London system, or white, or worried about it. It seems to be becoming the major issue with people. Just for the record, Mohammed, since you probably weren't here, we just looked at, now there's London systems, these kinds of London systems, against the King's Indian, against the Grunfeld kind of positions, against Slav kinds of positions, against Queen's Indian and kind of positions. So against Knight F6, there's all kinds of things, and we've talked about those in the past, especially the King's Indian. We've talked a lot about this particular, that kind of London, and what black can do in those positions. We've talked about quite a bit, and what white can do too. Today, early in the show, if you want to watch the beginning of the show again, we talked a lot about these systems. And I showed a system for black that Wesley So played against the guy who wrote the book on the London, Sedlak, just recently in the Olympiad. And Wesley So won the game as black. And he just played the traditional system as black. You can get there many ways, but basically it was this setup. I don't know. I'm going to just make moves and get there. The order is always different, but... and then playing here, that's white's only dangerous move. If you look at the London books, they all give that move. And we took a look at this basic thing, and which we did again also last week. So we got 2 straight weeks now of looking at this stuff. So you might want to check that out. And I think it's a good system for black. I would play it. I think it's fun for black, actually. And all you have to do is know the tricks. You have to know how to play against the tricks. Okay. Anything else here? There we go. Okay, let me just keep going then. We don't have a lot of chat today for some reason. Let me look at another question. What's the current status of Bronstein's queen sacrifice and the king's Indian. Let me show you this. EX77. I hope you guys can hear me. My headset's giving me issues here. I don't know why. EX percentage 77. Okay, let's show you this. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this. The funny thing is I've never played this. I've played the King's Indian as black. Okay, now this is the same-ish variation of the King's Indian. It's a funny order. Let me show you the normal order, what that would be. That would be, here's the King's Indian coming up. And here's what's called the same-ish variation is this move F3. Instead of, for example, knight F3 in the classical line or something like that. And black castles. And white usually plays bishop E3, although sometimes he plays bishop G5. So in this game, we get to that same position by a funny little move order. There. And black plays this move. And I've never played this as black. And as white, I've played the same-ish, but at this point I always play this move. A very flexible move. This move, which is the thing being asked about, is the traditional move. But it's very committal, and it allows a lot of different ideas for black. And one of those ideas is this old-fashioned idea of Bronstein's, or older idea of Bronstein's, which goes like this. Now, well, we could analyze why white plays queen d2, but it probably is, it's certainly the most critical move. And black plays this check. Now, just for the record, I should show you that, let me just say that, oh yeah, that this idea with f5, natural idea, right? If you're a King's Indian player, you play knight h5 and f5, right? But for years, people just thought white was just better here. The idea being you just play the king over and the rook over and play for c5. You're going to play some other moves first, probably that one, probably this one, probably that one, and then you're going to play for c5 because you've got more space on the queen side, and your king is pretty much safe. So that was sort of the theory, and in particular, black wasn't supposed to play this move because white's simply supposed to feel very comfortable about leaving that bishop sort of hanging out there nowhere and then just aiming for that move. That's sort of a standard kind of idea. What I discovered, even answering this question, but also I've sort of noticed over the years, is that f5 is actually doing reasonably well. Here's an interesting line, for example. Let me see. Okay, so castles. Here's an interesting thing that some very strong players are still playing black here, which I didn't realize. For a while, people weren't playing that very much. One reason you play a6 first is if you play knight d7, supposedly white can play here more easily. Because one idea is that after a6, if white plays bishop d3, maybe you could play this move c5, aiming for sacrificing pawns with b5, and if white takes it, then this bishop isn't particularly well placed in this position. And black still has ideas of knight d4, bishop e6, b5, rook c8, some combination of those moves, maybe queen a5. Now, you could argue anyway that white still has a pretty good game here. So that's just an opinion, one way or another, that black or white has about this position. But that's one reason for playing a6 first. And then let me just see if there was going to say anything about this. So just for example, this position. Bishop up now, knight up, bishop comes back. You don't want to lose your bishop pair. Oh yeah, and then b5. Black plays b5 here. Now, if white had even one move or two moves, if he could just get a piece out, he could drive this away, play for that, play rook over, and just win on the queen side. But the point is that it's black's move, and so black counters that with a pawn sacrifice. And this position is actually extremely interesting. If white does go here, it used to be that white would play back here, and still black would play back to d7 and still have some chances. But this is actually a fascinating move. And there was one game where white took that and black simply took back and got open lines against the king. And it was maybe about equal. Very strong play. I think Chaparnov or somebody very, very good as black who prepared this, so you can be pretty sure it's sound when it's him and with a computer. And also I noticed that you can also play this move and open lines that way and get an attack. And one reason I wanted to show you this little sideline with f5 is partly because it's instructive, but partly because last week we were talking about queenside and kingside castling again. And you'll notice that in this position, black has absolutely nothing going on the queen side. This position here, and can't even play c6 to break open lines because this pawn's hanging after captures. So he's years, whoops, actually this is here, he's way away from getting any action on the queen side. So you'd think this would be a great example of a very safe time to castle queenside for white. But it sort of shows the principle we talked about, which is that castling queenside is inherently dangerous. Even when you're ahead in tempi, you have to be very, very careful. It's okay here because you have space and you're pretty safe over there. But it turned out very quickly black got this move b5 in, and it wasn't so simple. And there have been a whole bunch of games with this. And my point, I guess, and we talked about that idea of b5 in the King's Indian too. I don't remember if you remember. Somebody just asked, when do you get b5 in the King's Indian? And this is a good case of it. This is get a sort of a Benko Gambit Benoni-ish sort of thing on the in the King's Indian. Now I'm not saying white isn't better here or that black isn't better. I don't actually know. I don't know the theory well enough, but it's playable for both sides, and that indicates that this whole line with f5 isn't so bad. Now getting back to the point, the line we're looking at is this line, which Bronstein invented. Now the first idea is if white goes here, it used to be thought you could go there and just play the endgame. I think white's definitely better in this endgame. So, but most everybody now plays that move, and white has failed to get any kind of advantage out of this position. So you just have to file that away as a factoid, as opposed to me trying to prove it. You could play this as white and see what happened, but in general, this hasn't worked very well. So what white does instead is he plays that move, and black takes, even though it looks like he's going to lose material after that move. It looks like he's going to get. He's being pinned, right? And if the knight moves back to protect the queen, you just take the knight. So it looks like this is sort of a blunder, but Bronstein's idea was to take that piece, not the knight, not the rook, which gets trapped, but the bishop. And then after this move, play here. And black is threatening this, he's threatening that. He has a beautiful knight on the 6th rank, so that's kind of neat. And the material isn't as bad as you'd think. It's 2 pieces for a queen, which isn't the end of the world quite, but you also have an extra pawn. And the real key in this position is you have no weaknesses, whereas white does. White's got white's very weak on the dark squares. Black has the bishop pair, which tends to be worth about a pawn by itself. So if you're doing point count chess, we're already up to 9-7 or something. We're only 2 points down, and then if you add the 2 bishops in, maybe you're only about 1 point down. And if you add an aggressive knight, which happens, by the way, usually next move to take this. For example, after this, that's another pawn. You could almost argue this is almost even material. So that's why this tends to work out, or can work out, for, same thing here, that's a well-known line, that this can work out for black, even though at first it looks crazy to give up your queen, but it's not quite that big a sacrifice as it turns out. Now there's thousands, literally thousands of games with this. And one good sign for black is it's played in correspondence, so that means that it's at least not refutable by any means. It maybe white can get an advantage, maybe not, but at least it's done fine in correspondence, which implies that that's close to equal, if not completely equal. So I guess I thought I'd show one game. Depends if we have questions here. No chat questions. Folks, speak up. Okay, well, I'll just keep going with this. So the question is, what's the status of the sacrifice? Meaning this position, basically. That's the beginning position of the sacrifice. So I looked up a bunch of correspondence games and recent games because I don't know what the status is. I've never played this for either side, but it's a fascinating line. One thing I thought was interesting was that this variation, this is not played very often. King e2 is by far the most common move. And then just bringing the queen over and attacking this. It's been recommended a couple places, and it turns out it's in a bunch of different databases. And I'm not sure. Just for example, if black sometimes plays this move, and I actually think white starts to get a really good game here. White can play here, forcing him to take that pawn, otherwise he doesn't have enough material, and then play some sort of h4y idea. Maybe not yet. Probably here to get a little pressure that way. And then if this move you go here, you don't want to get too greedy down here because then you really get slaughtered in a counterattack. But if you get a position sort of like this, for example, I don't know, something like maybe this. Whoops, probably not that. Probably b3. Well, no, that's okay because you can always just move after that. So something like, yeah. Anyway, the point is you get h4, h5 in, and all of a sudden I think white is better. I think white actually ends up better in a position like this. just my opinion. I kind of looked at some lines. But that's not forced by any means. Bishop h6 probably just isn't a very good move. I think you should just play naturally and just take the pawn. And there's a ton of games with this. White tries all these things like knight here and queen over, rook over, b3. The problem with b3 immediately a lot of times is that the knight can actually come to other squares. Maybe not here. No, here I guess you just go back. And usually what happens is that this knight ends up over here, the bishop comes here, rook comes over. Okay, so anyway, in this game, whoops, I should have gone back to the splitting place. Okay, so there's the sacrifice. In this game he plays this king e2 move instead of queen f2. Black grabs another pawn and white plays here. The idea is to real quickly get down there and take something down here, get your counterattack going. So black defends that, and white sort of attacks attacks this while defending b2 is the idea. And black retreats. Let me see. Okay, and here's another move, by the way. I think one reason black is okay in these positions, if I had this position, I would actually not play, I actually wouldn't play knight a6. I'd play Paquette's move, which is there, bishop d7. I think that's a better move. One thing is that after this, a lot of people play here, and white's done fairly well there, but I think this move is completely equal. It's very hard to get rid of that knight, and it has a lot of influence on the game. Now, black has all kinds of, well, you have to look up these games, because I can't really talk about all the ideas and all the threats and things, but I think you'll find black's fine in this position. So I would think, I think I would play this move, this bishop d7. Usually white will, if he knows what he's doing, won't play b3. He'll play there attacking here. And then the point is you can't really win this pawn. Well, you can win this pawn. You probably should, because otherwise I'm just breaking in the center, and I'm breaking with f5 at some point. But it just isn't that effective. Go ahead and attack that rook. Rook takes here, and now you have really knight c5 move. I think you start with something like this would be the easiest way to start, to try and penetrate. And this position, the more I looked at it, the more I liked it. Now the rook's trapped. You don't want to let black stay with the two bishops, so you take that one. And this position, if you look at it for a while, I think you'll find is completely equal. Black has plenty of resources here. So, and if you go over this stuff, by the way, be careful, because the computer tends to think that white's just winning and winning and winning, and then if you look at the big games with it, all of a sudden the computer will change its mind slowly but surely and say black's just fine, or better, or maybe slightly worse, depending who's outplaying who in the game. It's a good variation, because neither side is clearly better at all, and that's why both sides play this, are willing to play this. White and black are willing to play this way. So I guess my answer, let's look at the game. I guess my answer is, as a whole, is that here's the game. Okay, it comes back into the center. A lot of times white likes to get this move knight here in to get moves like that, or try to get that move in. And also that's just a good centralized knight. Black just develops. Now white's thinking maybe about going there, but also about centralizing over here. Check. I think that's a bad move as it turns out, or not a bad move, but it's probably not the best. It's best to just keep everything out. Just set up things very solidly, and then worry about attacking later. Just make sure there's nowhere for these knights to get in, or no attacking ideas. So in this game, he played check instead, which is, I guess, okay, but it's probably better to play this again. Just play, he calls it the turtle formation. Just stop everything from coming in first and then worry about it, because it's very solid. Black has no real weaknesses. And what this does, you'll see, allows white to get some play. That move. Now one of white's ideas now is that at some point he might threaten mate, and when that gets attacked, he might start attacking, making sacrifices. He's got to be a little careful. There's also knight g4. There's going to be a lot of moves on that side of the board. And these three minor pieces are all really active and nice, but look where they are. They're on the wrong side of the board. So black really needs to defend his king side, and so he does, but it may be a little bit late because of that bishop sitting out there. Let me just show you this. White plays right away, breaks through here. Normally you can take that pawn and own that square and have a backward pawn here, but if you take it now, you're just asking for it because the knight's coming into big squares. So you really can't take it, I don't think. Let's see what he did. I don't think he took it. Let me make sure. No, he just covered the second rank. These are all good moves, but he's just a little behind. He needs one extra move because now white plays that nice little move. And the point is that g5 now is too risky. Well, no, he plays g5. My fault. My fault. That would be... Oh, I wanted to show you... Yeah, okay, right. This is worth showing. If that... I didn't actually mention this. If that move, which looks like it wins something just here, and that's pinned, now the knight can come to all these good squares. So instead he plays this rook f7 move, and white goes by, and he does play g5. I guess he has to. I guess there's, oh, that's right. Well, he certainly can't take because that knight is a monster there, the Kasparov knight. And so he goes by, and I think he can just sacrifice. He doesn't sacrifice, does he? No, he plays there. I think it would also be strong to simply sacrifice here. Yeah, because now the threat is either f6 followed by knight f5 or doubling rooks followed by queen h6. This is very tough to meet. I think he has to play king h8. And now white has a whole bunch of ways of trying to attack here. Maybe just here, attacking this. And if bishop f6 and rook h7 probably works. Oh, almost certainly works. So this kind of thing looks pretty strong. I guess you'd have to play bishop here. And then maybe this move, with the idea of the knight coming in and the rook coming over. And I remember there's a theme here. If he goes here trying to attack that, it looks pretty good for black, but you have this move, followed by queen g6, and the rook's trapped. If he takes. If knight takes, for example. Look at that kind of thing. Awful. Awful that something like this can happen at all. I mean, I don't know how this happens, but anyway, so he could have already sacrificed. So you can see what black did wrong this game. This whole bishop b5 check thing may have been playable, but boy, putting all your pieces over here, black had to just make incredibly accurate moves to survive the kingside attack. And normally he doesn't have that much problem on the king side. So anyway, here's what happens in the game. He's on that, so white simply defends that, but also is able to put another piece up here. There's this is actually almost plays itself. White's just going to attack on the king side. h4, right? Yeah, see, there he is, breaking up that whole king side. And black gets out of the pin, but white doubles. White hasn't even had to give up a piece for this. Okay, so he manages to make this little sacrifice, the point of which I don't see yet, but I will in a second. Oh, just coming up with a knight, threatening here, followed by, for example, here, f6, knight f5. Oh, very clever. Okay. And black decides to give up material to defend, but gets killed anyway. That pawn was attacked. Now we have queen h6 check again. I'm amazed he's not resigning. Now we're going to have f6. I guess check first. Okay, now he resigns. Because for one thing, white's ahead material here. Black only has 3 pieces for the queen, and that pawn on f6 is overwhelming. So queen f5 is a huge threat, for one thing. I think knight, yeah, it's probably the biggest threat. There may be others. Okay, so that's kind of a cool game. And the answer to the question is I think black's still okay in this system, but obviously he has to be careful or something like this can happen to him. Is the Trompowsky played much? When I first started, it was popular, and is knight e4 the only good reply? Okay, Alan, good to see you back again. Alan asks very good questions. We've had a lot of good questions. The Trompowsky, we've also talked about the Trompowsky sum. This is the Trompowsky. And it doesn't really threaten to take that too much because so what? So you get doubled pawns, you can get open piece play. So black has so many answers. That's one issue right away that makes the question hard to answer. Black can play g6, isn't played very often, but I know that it was played against me once by a grandmaster, and it's perfectly playable. E6 is very, very popular. Not only does it stop at doubled pawns, but it just is a normal move that starts getting your pieces out. You've got c5 and bishop coming out. d5 is maybe the most popular answer of all. And the idea there, you can take either way here. You can take this way and play for e5, or you can take this way and get your pieces out quickly. And both those moves have been played. But white can also wait a move, which is what I do when I'm white. I usually just play that move. Some people play knight here, which I'm not so sure I believe. And I mean, I don't think that's the best move. It's certainly a decent move. But d5 is a major issue. c5 was played a lot in the original days, and it'll often transpose to these knight e4 lines here. So that brings us to knight e4, the question knight e4. So the first answer is no, knight e4 is not the only move at all. All the moves I just showed you are perfectly good. Grandmasters play these two really a lot. You can even play c6, not a terrible move. It even has a joke threat, which is watch out for this move, winning the bishop. Believe it or not, very top players have fallen for that a couple times, just because they're kind of asleep. They just started the game. They know their intention is to play e3 next. Guy plays c6. He says, "Oh, I don't care. I'm not going to go for it. I'm just going to play e3," and they have to resign a move later. World's shortest games. But But yeah, so knight e4 was the move that was played most often at the beginning because after all, it gains a tempo, and there's some very beautiful aggressive ideas that black can play. To go there, maybe go g5, maybe go bishop g7, just get all this pressure on the queen side. We've talked about this before, that when you bring a bishop out in a queen pawn opening, early when you bring this bishop out, a lot of times the thing to look at is what happens if the other queen counterattacks by coming to this side of the board. And the same thing's true with white against this bishop coming out. For example, any kind of normal queen pawn opening, you'll find that when the bishop comes this way to this side of the board, this is crazy, I don't know what I'm doing. Very often a huge issue is the queen coming this way, either to this square or this square, and creating trouble because the bishop has abandoned that side of the board. And that's why originally in the Trompowsky, people really thought that bishop's out there on g5 too early. I'm going to just get my queen to b6 or a5 as fast as possible. It turned out, by the way, that that theory was proven by the fact that what Trompowsky himself played early on, and almost everybody played, was this move, bishop h4, keeping that pawn pinned. But black just played very simply, attacking that, and then of course white often would play this move. But let's say he just moves this or something. Then it turned out that black got these very fast attacks with the bishop here. He also has h5, h4 ideas. And this turned out to be good. And actually, at some point, white simply stopped playing bishop f4. He can play the move h4, and that's very exotic, but not in the end. If black just ignores it, it's quite decent for black. So now that's the main move by far. Thousands of games played with this move, and black's idea was to attack really quickly on this side of the board. And the main line, which we may have already looked at in this, I have a lecture series on ICC on this, by the way, if you want to look at it. And there's also plenty of good DVDs around and books on the Trompowsky. So there's all kinds of material. But what I like for white is this side. Now, originally this move was played a lot, still is, played some. But black has this move check. So there's another example. This bishop goes that way and the queen comes this way. You'll see that's a common theme in d-pawn openings. And white really doesn't have anything better to do than this, because if he tries to exchange some pieces off, he just loses that pawn. And if he plays, well, you can check it out yourself, but really c3 is the only logical move. And this position turns out to be not so easy for white. Black's going to play c takes d. I think it's completely equal for black. I don't think there's any super problems here. The main line is here. And actually, I take that back. This can also be good for white, but only if he plays, for example, if black plays here right now, only if he plays all the way back with the bishop. And if you're going to do that, you might as well do it anyway. And I'll show you what I mean by that. What I mean is knight e4 for black, bishop here, pawn up. The main move is not f3. To me, the main move is d5. And originally black just loved this because he's threatening queen takes b2. He might even have a c4 threat this way, and there's it's still this idea of just attacking along the long diagonal. But the thing is, both the knight on e4 and the queen on b6 are kind of vulnerable to attack. So white started making this move, this interesting move, covering b2. By the way, this variation is still played quite a lot, but I think white's having a lot of fun here. You're going to gain time attacking that knight. It's going to make all that time you lost not look bad at all. And the other point is that this queen is vulnerable. If white plays c4 at some point, then there's no b5 unless the queen moves again. And otherwise, there's also the problem of the knight coming there with tempo to c4. So the queen on b6 has to be moved again usually. So black's losing more time. So what happens is black gains all this time, but then he loses it all back again. And in the meantime, white gets the center. White gets pawns on e4 and d5. So that's your knight e4 stuff. So I'd say knight e4 has gone down in popularity quite a bit. I would say the most popular move right now, the two most popular moves are e6 and d5. I think I can say that pretty safely. I haven't done a big study, but I would say that's the main point. And this one is extremely popular because nobody's really afraid of this. It turns out you can take either way. For years, all they ever did is take that way. That's every game was e takes d. But even g takes seems pretty good these days. So, in fact, it might even be more popular now. The one of the ideas being that you can play you can play a setup like that if you need to. Okay, so that's kind of a start. The question is it played much? Yes, it is. It's still played a lot, and knight e4 is certainly not the only good reply, and it's probably the one that's played, as I say, not played as much anymore. Still, it's a major reply, but Black needs to figure out some way to set up a piece. Well, now, for example, playing d5 now, which is not in the original spirit of things, because the original spirit was to get the queen over to the queen side. This is fairly popular. So I think when knight e4 is played, there's a strong tendency to play d5 in this position. So that's one answer. Knight e4 is played still for that reason. They feel like this is an equal position. I don't mind. I like white in these positions. I like just bringing my pieces out, and I play white in the Trompowsky, and of course I have to play black because I play knight f6. So anyway, I hope that helped a little bit. There's all kinds of good stuff out there in terms of analysis, and as I say, if you're an ICC member, you might want to just go on and get my Trompowsky lectures as a starting point. Nicholas Pert has written a DVD about it, has recorded a DVD. Just recently, Timur Gariev has put out a DVD on it. Just recently. There's some older DVDs, I think by maybe Davies, and there's also a whole bunch of books. I think Cyrus Lakhtiwala wrote a really nice, fun book on the Trompowsky, and so that's a good way to play it. Good place to look for black too. If I were black today, having not studied it much recently, I would play it very safe and just play this move, since you're thinking about black here to some extent. I think you are. I would think about just playing the simplest move, real good classical move. If he gives you another move, just play here, or play knight here, as one of my opponents did. Actually, I played here and he just played here. But you can also get your bishop out. Okay, so that's, yeah, Trompowsky's a wonderful opening for both sides, for both colors. I strongly recommend it. I think it's actually more interesting than the London. There you go, it's Davies' book. I think the Davies, isn't that a little old, maybe, Alan? I think it's some years old. I could be wrong. Yes, Avrick's Sidelines book, that's true. But Avrick has such a professional repertoire against it. He's just trying to get equality on move 14 and draw the endgame or something. I mean, I love Avrick, obviously, and it's a very well analyzed thing. He wants you to play knight f6 against the London and the Trompowsky. So he ends up getting, I think his anti-Trompowsky line is a full tempo. His anti-London line is a full tempo behind his anti-Trompowsky line. But then they're the same position exactly, because after knight goes to e4, he goes back to f6. So what Avrick has, let's see if I can remember this. Maybe you can tell me, Alan. You're talking about white or black, though, for you. What are you really interested in? Are you interested in black or both? Yes, the d4 sidelines repertoire. Yeah, Avrick, he gives, against the London, he gives these systems with d5 and c5 and stuff like that. And so the knight's already here. Against the Trompowsky, he plays pretty much the exact same thing, but he wastes a tempo. He plays this, and then later on he plays that back again. So he gets the London system position that he likes so much, and he gets it with a one tempo less. So I think it's kind of cool. It's kind of interesting that he does that. They aren't, to me, for the average player, they are not the most interesting lines to play against the Trompowsky. They just aren't they're very professional. Because you've got to remember, these professionals are really happy to draw with black. And most of you guys want to win your games with black, right? Because you're not playing 2,700 players every day. So anyway, I have talked an awful lot here, and I've gotten not too much chat, so I hope I haven't bored you to death. Come next time prepared with some chat questions and or send me questions. Remember, askimwatson@chessclub.com, AskimWatson@chessclub.com. Will you show us your favorite game? Actually, I think I showed one of my, but I can do that. I can show another favorite game. Right now would be a little bit late because we're already 20 minutes over time, I think. But yeah, what I do is I copy the chat afterwards, and then I try to address chat questions next week. So I will take that into consideration, or at least show you something fun and interesting that I also think teaches something, because I'm hoping this thing will be good for teaching. After all, it is an it's Ask I Am Watson, right? So it's more of a can you learn something? It's sort of a student thing. So I'll show you some game that I think is instructive. Hopefully next week, unless I get a ton of questions in the meantime, but I will get to it, I promise. So, okay, black. Okay, so you're interested in black, yeah. For years I played, I'll show you what I played. I played this. I like that move. If you're a King's Indian player, you could consider this move, because this really is not very harmful. It's not a hard position to play. I mean, you're just going to go like, let me just give you an example. Usually what they recommend against this are playing things like with G3, and let me just show you how this goes. I might get the order wrong, but a lot of times they try to get C4 in. And what you can do against something like that is you can play D6 and then C5. And again, watch out for the order. And the idea is to play F5. Don't take my word for it that this exact order, but that's kind of the theory of how to do it. Now maybe you're putting your knight here first. Yeah, you are. I'm sorry. So it goes something like this, and then you swing the other knight out around here, and then at some point I think you play C5. So that's something you can do if you like the King's Indian, and you just determined to play that way. You really don't have to be that scared of bishop takes F6. I played this for years and years. That was my anti-Trompowsky weapon. And you can play that a number of ways. Now, when you play that, you have to learn some theory, but that's okay. It's kind of good and interesting theory to learn because white can play very dynamically against that. And just thinking about it there and just getting a big center. And when you play here, of course, white can't retreat because you'll win the pawn, and that's a center pawn. It's way too important. But he can take it and then play a whole number of moves here, playing with two knights against two bishops. So that's good for black, but with a lot of extra space and good development, which is good for white. So it's an interesting trade-off. It's been played countless games with it, but it's a lot of fun. And white has all kinds of moves here. I think Pert wants you to play very slowly, play C3, and then maybe real slowly play for F4, or maybe bishop D3, knight E2, and F4. That's right. And other people just want you to go back into this. Sometimes you're forced to go into that because you have that move in already. In the Tory variation, this is a Tory attack variation. All these things are fine for black if you know what you're doing, but they're fun. They're fun for both sides. I mean, they're really interesting to play for both sides. It's a great opening. Let me show you why that's a Tory attack. That's because that could have happened in a very standard way, which is knight F3. A lot of people play E6 because they're still thinking in terms of the Queen's Indian or the Bogo Indian or the Queen's Gambit declined, right? But then white plays this, the Tory attack. And black says, okay, I'm going to chase you down because maybe, for example, I'm interested in playing knight E4 or H5 later. So white says, I'm not interested in that. I'm going to take. And guess what? By transposition, we have the exact position we just got from the Trompowsky. That's the exact same position. By the way, black usually plays D6 here just to kind of discourage that move. And there's all sorts of ways to set up for black. I mean, so you can set up like a sort of a Philidor. You can play an early G5. That's what discouraged me when I was white playing the Trompowsky. A game against, I think, Yarmolinsky or somebody. G5 is a much better move than it looks like. It looks weakening, but it does get you on the long diagonal quickly, and it threatens G4 sometimes. It forces white to waste some time. So anyway, all this stuff has been played a million times for white and for black, which indicates that it's sound for both sides. That's always a good sign. And so you could look into E6. The other thing about E6 that you have to know then, of course, is that what happens if he doesn't play E4? What happens if he? Oh well, let me go back. This would be Trompowsky order. The other thing would be what happens if he does? What if it happens if he plays slowly? For example, this move or something. And in that case, you can throw this in or not, but usually I tend to play C5 early because I am thinking maybe about Queen B6, since this bishop's out here and it's not defending over here. But also I'm willing to just go back into a D5, knight C6 standard kind of development. You can also play B6 lines. In fact, Aubrek against the Tory, I think at some point does play one of these takes and B6 and D6 kind of lines. So I don't know about the exact order here. That's probably what he would play in this position, for example. But yeah, so I mean, he would be willing to play a line like that too. Okay, that's very superficial, but the problem is it's books after books after books. Yeah, Hodgson was it was so much fun, and he gets all the credit in the world for realizing it. He played real lively, exciting attacking games so that before people understood what to do as black. And it was so much fun because some of them were completely unsound, as we found out later, but they created these great brilliancies. It was like Michael Tal or something. I mean, who cares if they were sound or not? He got these wonderful wins as white. That incredibly enjoyable games. I think Hodgson inspired more people to play the Trompowsky than anybody ever did because they were such great games. That might be a favorite game. I could show you one of those next week. Send you mail this week. Yes, please do, Mohammed. That'd be great. I will try to get to everything. Anybody who sends anything. You can also send your own games and just say, what do you think about this? And maybe have a question about the game or the opening, or you guys feel free to get a free lesson here. And one of the best ways to do that is to use that askimwatson@chessclub.com email address, because that way you got to really frame your question well. You can send a game with it or a ton of games with it if you want to, and get a, I'm a teacher, a professional teacher, so you're getting instead of being charged this massive amounts of money that everybody charges, you can get at least a little bit of a free lesson. So I strongly recommend that. Okay, everybody, I didn't realize how late it was getting. It's actually really, really late, and I want to thank everybody, and please come on again, tell your friends about it, and chat freely, and I will see all you guys next week. Thank you.